A cry in the night, the wind howled outside. Cold and sharp. The human man, Jake, was sitting near a small fire inside his cabin, deep in the alien forest. He had come here to study stars, to be alone, to escape noise. But that night, he heard something strange. It was a cry. Not the sound of a beast, not the wind. It was soft, like a child crying. A long, sad whimper that didn't stop. Jake stood up, alert. He stepped closer to the door, listening carefully. Again. The cry came. Closer now. He opened the door slowly. Cold air rushed in. Rain dripped from the leaves above. The forest looked black and wet. Then he saw it. A small figure stood at the edge of the trees, barefoot, soaked in rain, shivering. It was a child, but not human. The child's skin was pale blue. His arms were thin. He had big black eyes filled with tears. And his tiny voice said just one thing. Human, please. My mother. She cries every night. Jake blinked. The child looked weak, like he hadn't eaten in days. Jake stepped forward, kneeling. Are you hurt? Jake asked softly. The child shook his head. No, but no one is helping my mother. Since father left, she doesn't speak. She only cries, please, she won't stop. Jake felt a cold pit in his stomach. This child had walked through a storm. At night. Alone. Jake hesitated for a second. But then he grabbed his coat, picked up a flashlight, and nodded. Take me to her. The boy didn't smile. He just turned and walked into the woods. Jake followed. The path was slippery and dark. Trees twisted around them. Jake's boots sank into mud. The rain tapped on his hood. The child moved fast, like he knew every root and branch. Jake stayed. Close. How far is it? Jake asked. The boy didn't answer. They walked for nearly 20 minutes. The deeper they went, the more silent the forest became. Even the bugs were quiet. No sound, only the soft splash of their steps and the boy's shallow breathing. Finally, they stopped. A broken shelter stood ahead, made of rusted metal and cracked stone, half covered in moss. Jake frowned. This is your home? He asked. The boy nodded. Inside it was dark. Jake stepped through the torn curtain that served as a door. The smell hit him first. Mold, dust, sadness. Then he saw her. A woman lying in the corner, curled up, thin arms wrapped around her legs. Her head down. Her body shook slightly, but she made no sound. The boy walked to her and gently touched her arm. Mother. The human is here. She didn't respond. Jake knelt down, placing the flashlight gently on the floor to light her face. Her eyes were open, but empty. Her cheeks were wet. Her lips were cracked. She looked like she hadn't slept for weeks. Ma'am, Jake said softly. Can you hear me? Still nothing. Jake looked around. No food, no blankets. Just a small bowl in the corner with water, barely clean. He opened his pack and pulled out an energy bar. He placed it near her, then gave a second one to the boy. The boy held it carefully. Thank you. Human. What's your name? Jake asked. Zir. Jake nodded. Zir. When did your father leave? Zir sat beside his mother. Before the snow came. He said he would return, but he never did. My mother, she cried the first night, then the next night, then every night. Jake looked at the woman again. Her chest moved. She was breathing, but weakly. No one helped? He asked. Zir shook his head. The village says she is cursed, that our family brings bad luck, so they stopped speaking to us. Jake clenched his jaw. Something inside him burned. Anger, maybe, or sadness. No child should have to beg for his mother like this. She needs help, Jake said. Zir nodded. Will you help us, human? Jake looked around the broken shelter again. It was falling apart. Cold wind slipped through the holes. Rain dripped through the ceiling. The woman might not survive another night here. Jake stood. Yes, sir. I will help. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. But Jake didn't care anymore. He had found something more important than stars. The door creaked as Jake pushed it open wider. Cold wind followed him into the broken shelter. The flashlight in his hand lit up the cracked walls, the rusted corners, and the woman lying still in the shadows. It wasn't a home. It was a cage of sadness and silence. Jake had seen many places. During his time on alien worlds, some poor, some strange, but nothing like this. The walls were made of scrap metal and broken signs. The roof had holes wide enough to let in the rain. And the floor, it was just mud. The woman still hadn't moved. Zir, the little alien boy, sat beside her. He kept touching her hand gently, whispering in his language. She blinked, but did not speak. She only stared at the floor, as if her mind was somewhere far away. Jake moved carefully. He placed down his pack and pulled out a heat blanket. He opened it and wrapped it gently around the woman's shoulders. Her body was cold. Too cold. She doesn't talk anymore, Zir whispered. Not since the last storm. Jake nodded slowly. She's in shock. Or grief. Or both. Zir didn't understand all his words, but he felt the meaning. Jake took out a small heat lamp and switched it on. A soft orange glow filled the small shelter. The shadows melted away, and Jake could finally see the mother's face clearly. She was beautiful, but broken. Her eyes were dark and hollow. Her cheeks were sunken. Her lips were slightly blue. How long has she gone without food? Jake asked. Zir lowered his eyes. 2 days. Maybe 3. Jake handed him another protein bar. You eat too. Don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. The boy nodded, taking the food in his shaking hands. Jake looked around the room. There were no clothes, no supplies, not even a single photo or memory of the father. Nothing but dust, metal, and pain. And then he noticed something odd. Scratches on the inside of the door. Deep, claw-like marks. Jake walked over and ran his fingers across them. They were recent. What made these? He asked softly. Zir looked up, his eyes wide with fear. Something came during the night twice. I blocked the door with stones. But it smells her. Jake's hand froze. Smells her? Zir nodded. The creature. It walks on 2 legs. It doesn't make sound. I think it waits until I leave. Jake's grip tightened on the flashlight. He suddenly realized the boy hadn't just come looking for help. He had lured Jake here to protect his mother. Smart kid. Jake walked back to the woman. He crouched down again, close to her face. Ma'am, he said gently. I don't know your name, but I need you to hold on. For your child, for yourself, I will not let anything happen to you. A single tear ran down her cheek. She heard him. She just couldn't answer. Zir laid his head gently on her lap and whispered something in his language. Jake didn't understand, but the moment was clear. This was love. Pure. Quiet. Desperate. And this shelter, this broken box of rust and cold, it was the only thing standing between them and the wild night. Jake made a decision. I'll stay tonight, he said. I'll guard the door, you both sleep. Zir looked surprised. Really? Jake smiled softly. Really? He pulled an old chair near the entrance. He checked his laser pistol, fully charged. Then he dimmed the heat lamp to save power. Outside, the wind had stopped, but the forest had gone too quiet again. Jake sat down and stared at the door. The scratches still shimmered in the light. Something had come here before, and Jake had a feeling. It would come again, but this time, it wouldn't find weakness. This time, it would find a human waiting. Jake didn't sleep. He sat in the old chair all night watching the door, listening to every sound outside. A branch cracked once, then silence again. but nothing came. Maybe the creature knew someone new was inside. The sky turned pale with morning light. Zir woke first. He didn't speak. He just quietly crawled to his mother's side and checked her, breathing. Then he looked at Jake with eyes full of worry. "She's still not eating," he said. Jake nodded. He opened a food pack and offered the warm broth to the boy. Zir tried feeding her. A few drops touched her lips, but she didn't swallow. She turned her head away. Jake sat down beside Zir. "Tell me about her before this." Zir blinked. "Before all this?" "Yes. Before the sadness. Before your father left." Zir sat quietly for a while. Then, slowly, he began to speak. "She used to sing," he said. "Every night. Her voice made the sky feel less dark. Father said she was the star of his life. She used to dance too. Even when we had no light, she'd light up the room with just her laugh." Jake listened quietly, nodding. He could almost see her, alive, smiling, full of life. Zir's voice got softer. But then the storms came. Food became hard to find. Father went to the outlands to get work. He said he'd return in 3 days. He never did. Jake asked gently, "Did someone tell you what happened to him?" Zir looked away. "No one tells us anything. They only said, 'Bad luck follows your kind.' After that, no one helped us. Not even the healers." Jake felt a tightness in his chest. A child being punished for something he didn't even understand. "And your mother?" he asked. She stopped singing. She started crying. Then one night, she screamed. Not words, just pain. And then, nothing. No sound after that. Just her eyes, always looking far away. Jake looked over at the woman. Her face was still, but her fingers twitched lightly as if responding to the story. Zir noticed it too. "She's still inside," he whispered. "I think she's lost, like in a fog." Jake touched the boy's shoulder. "Then we pull her out, together." Jake stood up and stepped outside the shelter. The sun was rising, pale light touched the treetops. Birds chirped quietly, just a few. The forest was slowly waking up. He looked around. This place wasn't safe. The scratches on the door weren't just warnings. Whatever had made them would return. Jake turned to Zir. "We can't stay here. I need to get supplies, but I won't leave you alone." Zir stood too. "I'll go with you." Jake thought for a moment, then nodded. "We'll carry her. Wrap her in the blanket." Zir gently wrapped his mother. Her body was still light. Too light. Jake carried her in his arms, surprised at how fragile she felt. Her head rested against his shoulder. Zir led the way, guiding them through the forest path. They walked in silence for a long time. The village wasn't far, but every step felt heavy. When they arrived, eyes turned. Whispers followed. No one stepped forward to help. Jake walked straight to the healer's hut. A tall alien stood outside, his face sharp and cold. "She's dying," Jake said. "Help her." The healer shook his head. "She's been marked. Her kind brings darkness. I will not touch her." Jake's eyes narrowed. "You call yourself a healer, but you let people die?" The alien didn't answer. Jake turned to Zir. "Wait here." He carried the woman to a flat stone bench and laid her down gently. Then he pulled out a flare from his coat, lit it, and raised it high. Within seconds, a small crowd gathered. Jake spoke loudly. "This woman is not cursed. She is sick, abandoned. But she is also a mother. She has a child who has done nothing wrong. And still, none of you came. Not even once." No one answered. Zir watched quietly, his small hands shaking. Jake stepped forward. "If no one will help, then I will take her to the human base. She will get care. She will sing again, even if I have to carry her across every hill." An old alien woman stepped forward. Her face was wrinkled. Her eyes were sad. "I remember her," she said, softly. "She once brought me food when I had none. Let me see her." She walked slowly to the bench and placed her hand on the woman's forehead. "She's fading," the old woman said. "But she is not gone." Jake looked at her. "Then help me save her." The old woman nodded. For her, and for the child. The crowd had scattered. The old alien woman stayed behind, gently dabbing a warm cloth on the sick mother's face. Zir sat close, holding his mother's hand with both of his own. She hadn't moved, but a faint sound had escaped her lips earlier, like a whisper trying to break through silence. Jake stood by the bench, his fists clenched. Something felt wrong. Not just the healer's refusal. Not just the claw marks on the shelter door. It was something deeper. A question no one had dared to ask. Why was everyone so afraid of her? Jake walked back into the village alone. He stopped at the central gathering stone, where older aliens usually sat and gossiped. They watched him come. They didn't greet him. Jake didn't wait. Why was she left to die? He asked loudly. Why didn't anyone help her or her child? An older male looked up slowly. His skin was gray, and one of his eyes was glazed white with blindness. Because she's marked, he said. We don't speak her name anymore. Jake frowned. Marked by what? She's just a mother, she's grieving. Another voice joined in. A younger one, sharper. Her mate didn't leave by choice. He was taken. By the warden. Jake narrowed. His eyes. Warden? The elder gave a slow nod. A collector. A ruler of the mines beyond the cliffs. He takes what he wants. Strong males. Sometimes even females. Those who go don't return. But her mate promised to come back. He didn't, another alien added. So the village turned away. Her cries were cursed, her pain too loud. Jake's stomach twisted. These people didn't just abandon her, they punished her for surviving. And none of you thought to fight back? Jake snapped. They looked at him like he'd spoken madness. No, one defies the warden. Jake stepped forward, eyes hard. Then maybe it's time someone did. Back at the bench, the old woman stood up as Jake returned. She needs warmth, herbs, and care, she said. But what she really needs is hope. Jake kneeled beside Zir. Your father might still be alive. Zir's eyes widened. Alive? Jake nodded. Taken by this warden. If I can find him, maybe she'll come back to us. Zir looked toward his mother. She didn't react. But her hand twitched again. She hears us, Jake said softly. She's fighting. I'll fight too. The old alien woman placed a small pouch of medicine in Jake's hand. This will help her rest, but be careful. If you go to the warden's land, you may not return. Jake stood. If I return with her husband, then this village will owe that woman its respect again. And her child won't grow up alone. By nightfall, Jake had gathered what little he needed. A blade, a flare, a medkit, and courage. He stood at the edge of the village, looking at the path that led to the cliffs. Zir ran up behind him. Take me with you. Jake shook his head. It's too dangerous. But if father sees me, he'll know it's real. He'll believe he can come home. Jake hesitated. Zir's eyes were filled with something stronger than fear. Hope. All right, he said. But stay behind. And do exactly as I say. They began walking toward the cliff path. Behind them, the village returned to its silence. But for the first time, it had cracks in it. The forest changed the deeper they went. The trees were thicker, the air was colder, every step felt heavier. After 2 hours, they reached a ridge that overlooked a glowing minefield of lights and machines, the warden's domain. From above, Jake saw guards, tall, armored, alien brutes, and among them, thin figures dragging tools, workers, prisoners. Then Jake froze. One of the prisoners looked up at the stars, just like Zir often did, even from far away. He saw the same eyes. Zir, Jake whispered. I think that's your father. Zir gasped. Then he's alive. Jake looked down at the sharp walls, the lights, the guards. Getting in would be a challenge. Getting out with the father, even harder. But Jake didn't care. He had seen pain. Now he wanted to be part of the healing. He turned to Zir. "Your mother cried every night," he said. "Now it's our turn to make others listen." Zir nodded, and together they stepped into the shadows of the warden's land. The machines groaned below them. Jake and Zir crouched behind a thick tree branch, high on the ridge overlooking the warden's labor camp. The ground was lit with sharp red lights. Huge metal arms moved slowly, digging into the rock. Alien prisoners, dozens of them, worked with heavy tools, their bodies thin, eyes blank. Zir stared down, silent. Then his voice broke the air. "That's him." Jake followed his gaze. A tall male alien with pale blue skin like Zir's was dragging a metal beam across the dirt. His movements were slow but strong. A scar ran down one side of his face, but even from this distance, his eyes had that same quiet sadness. It was him, Zir's father. "He's alive," Zir whispered, shaking. Jake nodded. "Yes. But for how long?" Guards walked the outer ring with shock spears and scanners. The camp was surrounded by electric fences. There was only one gate, and it was guarded by a metal beast, half machine, half creature. Jake studied the pattern of the guards. Every 7 minutes, a gap in their patrol appeared near the far east fence. That was their opening. He turned to Zir. "You stay here. If I don't come back in 1 hour, return to the village and tell the old woman everything." Zir's eyes filled with fear. "But what if you—" "I'll come back," Jake said firmly. "With your father." Zir bit his lip, then nodded, slowly. "Okay, but please be careful, human." Jake moved through the shadows like a whisper, down the ridge, through the trees, closer to the fence. He waited for the 7-minute mark. The gap came. He slipped through, crouching behind a pile of old scrap metal. The air smelled like burning oil and sweat. Prisoners groaned under the weight of machines. No one looked up. No one had hope. Jake moved closer, sticking to the dark. He found a tunnel opening used for bringing tools. 2 guards stood nearby, laughing. Jake pulled a small stone from his pocket and threw it far to the side. It landed with a loud clang. The guards turned, walking toward the sound. Jake slipped in. Inside the tunnel, it was darker and tighter. Echoes of pain bounced from the walls. He moved silently, turning corner after corner until he saw him. Zir's father. He was kneeling near a wall, fixing a broken cable. His arms were cut and bruised, but he worked with calm hands. Jake crouched behind a crate and whispered, "Friend?" The alien froze. "I'm here to help," Jake said. "Zir sent me. Your son." The alien turned slowly. His eyes widened. "Zir?" he said, voice cracking. "My boy?" Jake nodded. "He's safe. Your mate is alive, but she's not well. She needs you." Tears welled in the alien's eyes. I thought they'd forgotten me." Jake reached out. "Come. Now. While we still have a chance." But the alien hesitated. "There's something you don't know," he whispered. Jake frowned. "What?" The alien looked around, then leaned closer. "The warden. He didn't just take me. He made me sign a deal. My freedom, in exchange for my family's silence." Jake's stomach dropped. "Silence?" "He promised to protect them if I agreed to never return. I signed it. A blood bond." Jake gritted his teeth, and he left them to starve anyway. The alien nodded. "He lied." Jake stood up. "Then your deal is broken. It's time to go." But a deep growl echoed down the tunnel. The warden had found them. The creature was taller than any guard. Its body was metal and flesh stitched together. Its head had 3 glowing eyes. Its voice was deep and cold. "You broke the bond, human." Jake stood in front of the father. "He owes you nothing now. You left his family to die." The warden raised one arm. A blaster glowed at its wrist. Jake pulled a flash grenade from his coat. "Tell Zir his father is coming home," he whispered, and threw it. The blast lit up the tunnel like a sun. Jake tackled the alien father through a side vent. Sparks flew. They crashed onto a sloped tunnel path and rolled into the mud. Alarms rang. "Run!" Jake shouted. The father grabbed Jake's arm. "This way." They bolted through an old mine shaft, one the father had mapped long ago in secret. Broken rails, cracked walls, dust everywhere. Light ahead, they burst out into the trees. Zir was waiting, eyes wide. "Father." The alien fell to his knees, pulling his son into his arms. "I thought I'd never see you again," Zir cried into his chest. Jake looked back. No one followed. Not yet. But this wasn't over. He turned to the father. "She needs you now." The father nodded, tears streaming. "Then take me to her." The wind carried the sound of footsteps through the forest, but these were not the footsteps of fear. They were the footsteps of a father returning home. Jake led the way, breathing hard, still muddy from the escape. Behind him walked Zir, holding tightly to his father's hand as if he feared he might vanish again. The alien father, thin, scarred but no longer broken, walked without pause. He didn't ask to rest. He didn't ask what would happen next. He only asked once softly, "Is she still alive?" Zir looked up at him and said, "She's waiting for you." That was enough. When they reached the edge of the village, the sky was gray. A cold mist hung over the ground. People stared. Whispers followed. But this time they didn't turn away. Jake marched toward the old stone bench where the mother still lay wrapped in the human's heat blanket. The old alien woman was still tending to her, brushing her forehead gently with a wet cloth. She looked up as they approached, her eyes widening at the sight of the man walking beside Jake. She stepped back without a word. Zir let go of his father's hand and ran forward. "Mother, he's here. Look, he came back just like he promised." But she didn't move. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. Jake turned to the father. "She's been like this, quiet, distant, but she can hear. I know she can." The father dropped to his knees beside her and placed a trembling hand on her cheek. "My heart," he whispered. "I came back. I'm sorry I took so long." For a moment nothing changed. Then, her fingers twitched. Zir gasped. "She moved." The father leaned closer. "I never stopped thinking about you. I counted every day. I whispered your name. Under the ground. Please, don't leave me now." Her lips parted, just slightly. A broken breath escaped. Then, in a voice dry as dust, barely more than a whisper, "You came back." Zir froze. Jake stepped forward, the father's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, I'm here. I broke the bond. I broke the chains." Her eyes finally moved, slowly, until they found his. She blinked, and then the tears came. Real, warm, living tears. "Zir," she croaked, her voice cracking. The boy was already in her arms, sobbing, pressing his head against her chest. She slowly lifted a hand and held him close. Her voice was weak, but her spirit was waking up. "Both of you came back." The village watched in silence. Even those who once called her cursed now looked down in shame. The old alien woman stepped forward again. "She needs rest, care, food, and warmth." Jake nodded. "Then let's give her everything we can." By nightfall, things had changed. The mother was moved into a warmer shelter, built with human tools and alien hands. The village healer came, not with excuses, but with medicine and quiet apology. A few villagers even brought food. Jake stood by the fire outside, watching the stars. The father sat with Zir, telling him a story, one the boy had never heard before. Inside, the mother slept peacefully, for the first time in weeks. She wasn't crying. Jake closed his eyes. He had heard her speak. He had seen her return from the darkness, and tomorrow she would rise again. The stars were bright again, not because the sky had changed, but because someone who had once been lost had found her way back to life. The alien mother stood outside the new shelter. Her steps were still slow, but steady. Wrapped in a warm shawl stitched by village hands, she looked up at the stars that once felt so cold. Zier stood beside her, holding her hand proudly. "Do you remember?" he asked softly. "You used to sing to the stars." She smiled, just a little. "Yes, I remember." And for the first time in a long while, her voice didn't shake from sadness. It held strength. Jake and the father stood nearby, watching. From the fire. The father had shaved the rough beard from his face. His shoulders were no longer slouched with guilt. He looked like the man he used to be, before the mines, before the lies. The mother turned to Jake. "You are the reason I'm alive." Jake shook his head. "No, Zier is the reason. He never gave up." Her eyes softened. "And you listened." Later that evening, the village gathered. Not for punishment, not for shame, but to honor the family they had once forgotten. The village leader stepped forward. His voice cracked with age, but his words were strong. "We watched them suffer and turned away. But now, let us walk with them again. Let this family stand as a reminder that even in silence there is strength." The crowd nodded, some in tears, others in guilt, but most in respect. The mother took a slow breath. And then, just as the breeze touched the trees, she began to hum. The same melody she once sang when the world still felt kind. Zier's eyes lit up. The father smiled through his tears. Even Jake froze. Her voice was quiet but beautiful, rising into the night, wrapping the village in peace. The stars seemed to listen, and for a few moments, all the pain, all the fear, all the loneliness, washed away. After the gathering, Jake stood at the edge of the forest, ready to leave. The mother walked up to him slowly. "You could have left us to suffer," she said. "But you stayed." Jake gave a half smile. "You reminded me what strength looks like. I didn't save you. I just gave you a hand." She reached into her shawl and pulled out something small. It was a pendant, rusted, old, but carved with a symbol. "Our family's mark," she said. "Take it so you never forget us." Jake hesitated, then took it gently. "I won't." Zier ran up and hugged Jake tightly. "Will you come back someday?" he asked. Jake knelt down. "Count on it." The father stepped forward. "If ever you need a place to rest, I think our home is yours." Jake gave a final nod, then turned and walked into the trees, the pendant clutched in his hand. Behind him, laughter rose from the shelter. Music, life, and above, the stars shone brighter than ever. The mother watched Jake disappear into the trees. She closed her eyes, holding her son close. For the first time since her mate had vanished, for the first time since her tears had dried into silence, she smiled at the stars again.